Hi and welcome back to the channel. Australia doesn't do a lot of science fiction movies well. Of course, you've got Mad Max, you've got The Time Guardian, which is a piece of crap. You've got a whole bunch of recent ones which are of varying quality. And you've got the new American television series La Brea, where when people go into the distant past of Los Angeles, it looks like and is Central Victoria, Australia, and everyone in Australia is laughing because it basically looks like there should be a gold mine nearby and then a little petrol station that serves meat pies next to it. But leaving that aside, got two movies for you, both directed by a guy called Luke Sparke, who a few years ago gave us a really nice monster movie called Red Billabong, which I recommend that you check out if you haven't already. Nice monster movie, nice ensemble cast as well, which I think is one of the strengths that Luke Sparke has as a director. Red Billabong's great because the monster is an Australian monster, a bunyip, and it looks great. And also the movie has Roger Ward in it, so it can't be bad. So Luke Sparke then escalated and moved up a little bit and gave us a movie called Occupation.
The ex-captain Matty Simmons, ladies.
Max, what is that?
Take cover!
This one's a nice alien invasion movie that really punches above its weight. The special effects are crisp and well handled. The characters and the ensemble of characters are pretty good. And having the location in the northern part of New South Wales along the coastline means that it's an innately Australian alien invasion movie. Dan Ewing stars as a local football player who, after a brain injury, is doing a comeback with his local team, the Drop Bears, and that in itself is a joke. You might want to Google Drop Bears. So the whole town's there. There's a little bit of a farmer's market in the town. Some people who aren't locals come into the town, a man who's just got out of jail and his family. And the man is played by Temuera Morrison, one of the great New Zealand actors. Nobody does ferocity like Temuera Morrison. And yes, he has been in The Mandalorian, but is far from his best work. So they set up the ensemble. There's Temuera Morrison, his son and daughter, and his wife. We've got another football player who's just found out that his girlfriend, who's a doctor, is pregnant. And we have Dan Ewing's character, who is self-medicating with painkillers because of his brain injury. And his girlfriend also works at the hospital. So there's a football game at night. Everybody's in town's at the football game. There's lots of stuff going on. And then suddenly there are lights on the horizon and an ear-piercing sound. The lights get closer and they find out that there are a whole bunch of alien drones zooming over the town and blasting anything that moves. Then we get a mothership, which is about the size of Tasmania, sitting over the world. And it's on for young and old. Now, this one works for a number of reasons. First off, the characters act realistically. They don't act like gung-ho, gun-crazy people. They act like the people they're supposed to be. And so, as time moves on, it takes place over a period of 8 months from the alien invasion. And we see the characters evolve and change. Some of them die, some of them don't, some of them change, some of them don't. And we find out that this small group of people who have survived the town are fighting a guerrilla war against the aliens while trying to get the rest of the town's people who have been enslaved by the aliens free.
Occupying force can be brought to its knees if you have the will and the drive to fight.
The aliens themselves are pretty cool. We first see them wearing helmets and armor and things like that, and then we see them without their helmets, and they're pretty much usual grey aliens, but well done. And we find out that there's a little more complexity to them than we first thought. They're refugees. They've totally screwed up their planet. Earth's the only other option for them, so they've come here to take over the Earth. Pretty much a standard plot point, but still, it's well handled. And the big boss alien of this one is played, at least in voice, I don't know about physicality of the costume, but in the voice, played by great Australian character actor Bruce Spence, who has been doing Australian science fiction and other films since the early 1970s. Did a movie called Stalk for Tim Burstall back in the day. He was the autogyro pilot in the second Mad Max movie. Been in everything. He was also in Dark City, for that matter. So that gives it a little more credibility and a little more prestige, getting in Bruce Spence. Eventually the guerrilla fighters meet up with the remains of the Australian army, who are led by a kick-ass female commander played by Jacqueline McKenzie, who was in that movie The Gateway I talked about a few weeks ago. And she really kicks ass in the character. It's not necessarily one that was in her previous resume, but she really lands the character well. She coordinates the fight against the aliens. There's a MacGuffin in the alien craft. And so we cross-cut between 3 or 4 bits of action where each one's important to the survival of the group and survival of human life on Earth. We don't find out too much until right at the end of the film of what's happening in the rest of the world. It's very much localized, which is one of its strengths, because if you don't have the money to tell an enormous global story, if you don't have a Roland Emmerich kind of budget to basically smash the Earth, you've got to keep things local, you've got to keep things contained. And this movie does that really well. The locations are very good too. Picking a nice little town in a kind of temperate climate area, which has got cane fields around it and an old sugar mill, which is the base for the aliens, works really well. And I kind of like the way that they discover A, what's happening, B, who the aliens are, C, how to fight them, and D, the complexity of them, because in a sense they're refugees just struggling to survive. So the aliens are as much up shit creek as the humans are in their own way. We get some familiar Australian faces in the movie as well. Roy Billing playing the town mayor, and Felix Williamson playing the local DJ. We also get the strong female characters of the 2 sisters, played by Stephanie Jacobson and Rhiannon Fish. They punch well above their weight in the movie, and we see them return in the second film. Though the character of Amelia, played by Stephanie Jacobson, is actually played by Jet Tranter in the second film. Just to summarise on Occupation, it works. I think having a good grounding with character actors Dan Ewing and particularly Temuera Morrison really makes it work. Giving it an Australian location and an Australian feel too. It definitely has an Australian cultural feel about it. Makes it just that little bit different than other alien invasion movies. So Occupation from 2018 is definitely a recommend from me. Then in 2020, Luke Sparke made the sequel, well, the first part of the sequel, Occupation Rainfall Part One. There is a Part 2 as well, so it's going to end up being a trilogy. And in this one, he goes balls to the wall crazy. This movie is mad. It is next level WTF mad. It takes up 2 years after the start of the alien invasion, and people are living like rats underneath Sydney. The harbour bridge is smashed, the opera house is smashed, the aliens have a whole bunch of different colonies set up in the western suburbs of Sydney, which by the way is a stupid move because I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, and even if you're an alien you don't want to live there unless you have to. There are also some alien collaborators now who have changed sides and want to live a free life with the humans. And Amelia, the character, has become kind of like the Greta Thunberg of alien refugees. And she speaks their language. She also goes to bat with them against the xenophobia of certain survivors. So there's a little more female agency in this one than there is in the first one, which is kind of cool. The aliens are constantly bombarding Sydney and trying to get the refugees out. The refugees have a whole bunch of different ways of fighting the aliens, and they also have a couple of aces up their sleeves, being A, the alien people who are on their side, and B, a bunch of alien horses. In fact, 2 of them. So Sydney isn't defendable in any way, so the refugees decide to leave in a whole bunch of battle trucks out of Mad Max, and they do so leaving the city just as the aliens drop a space rock on my hometown. So I'm definitely not on the alien side there. Like I said, the movie gets crazy. The next thing you need to know is the geography for this movie is all over the place. There are things that are thousands of kilometres apart that people get to in a day. There are actually 2,000 kilometres apart, coming to think of it. Yeah, 2,000 kilometres apart. And people get from one to the other in a day, which is mad, and from an Australian point of view it just doesn't work. But you got to lean into the craziness on this one. So we find out that there's a giant army base underground in the Blue Mountains west of Sydney, up in the Megalong Valley, a place I know quite well because I lived up there for a while. And it's an enormous base. It's about 1 kilometre long and about a couple of 100 meters high. It's full of jets and other things, and there's a guy running it who is the last surviving army commander, who also has PTSD because he was tortured by the aliens along with a few other people. And he is mad. He is not good mad. He is not Robin Williams doing a comedy riff mad. He is evil. Meanwhile, the survivors, and Dan Ewing's character and a few of the others, escape the aliens, taking along 2 of the alien horses. Now, here's where I explain the alien horses, which are part of the madness. Have you ever seen the old 1980 cartoon Thundar the Barbarian?
Thundar, the Barbarian.
Where they have a really cool character called Ukla the Mock. The horses they have, the alien horses they have, are basically the same horse that Ukla the Mock rides in Thundar the Barbarian. They're big, they're kind of reptilian, they are incredibly loyal, but when they kill something they will eat it, which is kind of useful at various times. And they travel very fast. So the survivors take the horses up into the mountains, where it's snowy for some reason, even though it's not snowing in the Megalong Valley. Maybe they go down to Jindabyne where it's snowing, and occasionally does snow. And they meet up with Peter, the character played by Temuera Morrison in the first movie, who has set up a village for survivors with his family. They come riding into this little village with an alien. They've got an alien called Gary. Yeah. Who is a really big, muscly alien, and who's very much on their side. He's kind of the Mr. Spock of the aliens, in a sense. And so they come in there, they settle down for a while, they're trying to find their way to Pine Gap. Now, Pine Gap is a real-life American military base in the Northern Territory, which does electronic intelligence work. It listens to signals, it does all that kind of stuff. And for Australians, it's kind of like our Area 51. So those survivors have got to get to Pine Gap because there's something there that will help them. They don't know what. They've been told by the people who left Sydney that they need to get there fast and find this whatever it is to help them fight the aliens. And so for some reason they go to Jindabyne, which is even further away from Pine Gap than Sydney is. So they settle for a day or so to kind of recuperate there. And the rest of the villagers, apart from Temuera Morrison and his family, get out the pitchforks and torches to try to kill Gary the alien because he's an alien. They're led by a character actor here in Australia called Vince Colosimo, who wants to kill Gary, but Gary kind of stops him from doing that. And the party moves on with these alien horses toward Pine Gap, which is about 2,500 kilometres away. On the way, they encounter a whole bunch of aliens who have floating tanks, and they take out the floating tanks, which is very cool. There's some really nice scenes there. They also meet up with an alien apex predator, which is kind of like if you got 2 giant spiders and bred them with crabs and glued them back to back. That's the alien monster in this one. It's really well done. It's a really nice piece of design. And they get into a fight with that because you need to have an action scene. So between getting the tanks from the aliens, they actually grab one of the tanks from the aliens, and having the Ukla the Mock horses, they end up in Pine Gap, 2,500 kilometres away. It takes them about 25 minutes to get there for reasons of plot convenience. So they get to the Pine Gap base and they find that there are only 2 people there because everybody else is nicked off. Those 2 people are Ken Jeong and an alien called Steve, because all the aliens are given human names, who's voiced by Jason Isaacs. Jason Isaacs is a British actor who's playing an alien who speaks with an American accent. Work that through.
My name is Bud Miller, and we're cooperating. And this is Steven.
Hi, Steve. I'm not sure if I am cooperating.
Ken Jeong's character and Steve have spent the last 2 years pretty much watching television. And so Steve talks mostly in quotes from movies. And they have something at Pine Gap. There's a giant alien artifact which looks like a beetroot, which for some reason is going to fix the aliens. Meanwhile, the main alien force has discovered the base that they have in the Blue Mountains in west of Sydney and decide to take a whole bunch of their great big ships and blow holes in it with enormous red laser beams. There's also a power play between the people who want to negotiate with the aliens and the people who just want to kill them all, even though the people who just want to kill them all aren't going to succeed. And so you get a little bit of that, and they find out that in the basement of this giant base under the Blue Mountains, they're running basically a Nazi concentration camp where they're torturing aliens, partly to get information and partly because it makes them feel good. So you've got a lot of subplots running in this movie. Then you meet the boss alien, who's this big insect-like female alien who's got wings and doesn't look like any of the other aliens. In fact, there are about 3 or 4 alien species in this movie. It's all a bit mixed up. She looks a little animatic, and she kind of negotiates with the humans, but then stabs one of them through the guts with a spear. And it's on for young and old. Now, the movie ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. Some of the cast are up in space where the alien spaceship is. The aliens have got the MacGuffin that's going to destroy the world. And we've got to wait for part 3. I'm on board for that. It's mad. They escalate in the second movie so insanely and so entertainingly that it's worth checking out. It's on Netflix. I don't know whether the original one's on Netflix at the moment, but I know that Occupation Rainfall Part 1 is on Netflix, and it is crazy. You've just got to lean into all of the absurdities, all of the geographical WTFs, all of the fact that they've got alien Ookla the mock horses and giant crab monsters and all sorts of other stuff, and go for the ride. It's there for the entertainment. They kind of steer away from the character beats that we have in the first movie, which for me is a little bit of a disappointment, but for the most part, once they leave Temuera Morrison's village up in the mountains, it's really a movie that you kind of go, what's happening? In the best possible way. So when the part 3 does get released, and I know that Luke Sparks is currently working on it, but yeah, we got a pandemic and that's kind of slowing things down, I'm going to review it for this channel. So I recommend Occupation and Occupation Rainfall. They are mad movies, and they definitely have an Australian flavour, and I want to see more stuff from Luke Sparke. I think that as a genre filmmaker, he's definitely on point. He is good with ensembles and getting the ensembles to work together and giving a grounded realism to them. So that's it for this time around. By the way, good news, we're out of lockdown now. We can't go out of the Melbourne metropolitan area, but we soon will be. But the curfew's gone, the lockdowns are gone, and we can pretty much do what we like in cafes as long as we wear a mask, check in, and don't cough on the waiters. So that's good news. Unfortunately, the cases are still rising, but the vaccination rates are really high here in Victoria, and so we're hoping to muscle through on that one. I'm kind of glad. I went for a drive in the middle of the night last night just because I could. But anyway, look after yourselves. Be safe. Watch some good movies. Watch some bad movies. Definitely watch Australian alien invasion movies that are crazy. And I'll catch you next time.